Trace Strelko, joined by Adam Eaton. Welcome in to Sons of UCF Live. Adam, hello.
Hi, Trace. How are you? Welcome to Sons of UCF Live. We have a fun show prepared this evening, Trace. One more time, we have a show for everybody out there. Thanks for tuning in. We've got a bunch of good stuff. Don't go anywhere.
How's your week?
Great week around here in the Eaton household. My daughter graduated high school. That was a fun event. Got to spend some time with some family. Got some work stuff caught up this week. So it's been a fantastic week here in Casa de Eaton.
That's good to hear. Before we get going with our show, stay with us for a very big announcement, a special announcement that is coming up on Sons of UCF Live. Of course, reminding you, at Mr. Matt Dolan says, 14 weeks until the start of the 2025 UCF football season on a Thursday night. 14 weeks from now at fifth quarter UCF. 98 days. We're under 100 days. The energy is building. Can't you feel the buzz?
I did see our good friend Sidelines UCF start now posting the uniform number of days away. That's how you know you're getting closer. We're in the 98s, 99s, so we still got some time here. But anytime you start seeing the uniform numbers posted, it's always a good time. It's 3 months, Trace. A lot of things can happen in 3 months. It's a short time. It's a long time. You never know what it'll be, but it's closer than it was a week ago today. So I like that math. I like those odds.
Less than 100 days, and the powers that be in college football tinkering with the playoff format. The one constant that you can expect from college athletics is change, right? College football playoff format changing. ESPN, amongst those outlets, reporting the 4 highest ranked teams will receive the top 4 seeds in the college football playoff. What do you make of that?
Well, here's what's interesting, Trace. If I read this correctly, in order for this to pass, it had to be a unanimous vote by conference commissioners, which means one, Brett Yormark had to have voted yes for this to take place. Now, that sounds kind of funny, right? Because you would think that the SEC and the Big Ten would benefit most from this rule, and conferences like Brett Yormark's and like the ACC would not benefit from this rule because you know that the SEC wants more teams, wants better status. So why, Brian Windhorse fingers, why would Brett Yormark do that? Why would he vote yes for this when it does have potential negative impact for his conference? Is there something coming down the road? Is this a we do you a solid now, you do us a solid later situation? It remains to be seen, Trace, but it was a unanimous vote, which means the conferences like the Big 12 and like the ACC, who will have some impact here, said, let's go ahead and do this. Why would they do that? I don't have that answer yet. I don't know if anybody has that answer yet, but I think that's something to monitor as the rest of the summer here plays out.
Big 12 wants to remain in the club, right? And despite all this talk of the SEC and the Big 10 gobbling up more and more real estate, you still need the Big 12. You still need the ACC, don't you? You can't just get rid of every conference. You can't squeeze everybody out and it just be this super league of two leagues. Can it really just come down to those two? They need the other ones, and I think Brett Yormark needs to remain in the club.
To what extent do they need those, right? Like, do they just need 1 or 2 represented? Do they want a fair representation? I think that's the question. Sure, you need other teams, other conferences to kind of balance that out. But do you just need 1 Big 12, 1 ACC? Do you want 2 of each? How many of the SEC teams do you want? And I think that's what's interesting is, the seat at the table remains for the Big 12 and the ACC and all conference champions. They get an auto bid into the playoff. They just lose the opportunity potentially to host a game, which would have impacted teams like Arizona State last year, by the way, who won the Big 12. So yes, they need them. Yes, they're going to be there. But to what extent and how many of them do they need? I think that's the question that bears monitoring as the summer rolls on.
How often do you think the Big 12 finds itself in one of those top 4 spots?
It's going to be unlikely, right? Because at this point, there isn't a dominant team that we've seen in this conference. And so it would feel unlikely unless somebody goes on a really dominant run throughout the season. On paper right now, it looks like a team of a conference of parity where anybody can win, and reference Arizona State from just a year ago. So it's probably the odds are against the Big 12 to be one of those top 4 teams. But all it takes is a couple of lucky bounces, lightning in a bottle, and all of a sudden you have a team that's up there. But I think it's fair to say, Trace, we've said this before in shows, nobody from this 16-team league has really established itself as the dominant power in the conference yet. That's still up for grabs. We'll see if anyone can take hold of it and can stake claim to it. But right now, you would think that's a long shot for the upcoming season.
Does a league like the Big 12, in your opinion, need a dominant team? Remember, I referenced this with ELO and Around the Kingdom recently. Memphis, just steamrolled everybody in the American. But that was big for the American brand to have Memphis be, one of the top teams in the country in men's basketball. That is certainly not the case. I mean, Houston, but in college football, that's not the case. Does the Big 12 need that dominant? I mean, I don't see that dominant team happening. You never know what's going to happen season to season, but there is a great deal of parity. But could they benefit from that?
I don't like the word dominant in that sentence. I think they need a headline grabbing team, i.e. a Colorado style team, but they weren't any good. Dominant doesn't feel like the right word I want to use, because that makes it seem like the conference is open and shut. And I, as a fan of a team in the conference, unless that's us, I'm not interested in the dominant team. But I do think you need some storylines. You need something that props the conference up. You need a rivalry of some sort. You need a great player, a Heisman candidate type candidate. Now, we had that last year with Colorado, and the Big 12 still didn't get a ton of love, and maybe a lot of that went to the Deion crowd. So I think you need something. I don't know if dominant is what you need, because then it just becomes, this is one great team and a bunch of also-rans. Unless we're the great team and everyone else is the also-rans, I don't know if I'm interested in domination by any one Big 12 school.
I'm going to need more time to digest this, but it on the surface seems to weaken the regular season a bit to me as well. The one thing I definitely don't like are the preseason polls. I know for shows like ours and all of these sports shows, they want that conversation, but they're completely useless. Remember Florida State, what was it, a couple seasons back, number 2 or 3, and then they fall out of the top 25. But if you'd beaten them early, you got a top 25 win. I mean, all of that stuff is meaningless. And this is going to end up stacking up with the SEC and the Big 10. I don't know what the benefit is to the Big 12, but I think they want to remain in the club. CBS Sports out with its ranking of all of the coaches at the FBS level. And I don't think they make any foam fingers for number 62. That's where Scott Frost comes in. And, I know the affection on the part of the fan base for Scott Frost, but there's a line in there. Not so fun fact, if you're a UCF fan, Frost has now been a head coach for 7 seasons, including the 22 season that he did not finish, and the 13-0 season in 2017, his only winning record. If you put that not so fun fact on any other name, UCF fans would not be interested in that person at all. Barry Odom. Barry Odom. That's your no, we don't want that guy. Somehow we want number 62. Right? It's just sort of, I mean, I don't know. The rankings, this is May fodder. They're putting out lists like this, but I mean, how much higher would you have UCF in the preseason rankings in the Big 12? How much higher on the list would you have Scott Frost with statistics like that?
Well, it's unclear how many people voted in this. I read the article multiple times. I don't know what the voting panel looked like, but they did offer a stat. The highest Scott Frost was ranked was 53. The lowest was 66, which I guess
that was out of 66.
68. There's 68.
68.
Jeff Lebby, 68, by the way, former UCF offensive coordinator. And so I think it's relatively fair, right? Like I understand why you look at this hire, you look at this team with skepticism. We've talked about this week in and week out, and with every new poll that comes out, if it's ESPN ranking the portal, if it's ranking the teams, it's ranking the coaches, ranking the quarterbacks, UCF is on the bottom half of that list.
Well, when you look at it like that, I think we just talked about quarterbacks recently being amongst the lowest. When you're going to look at it like that, I guess so.
Fun fact, though, Scott Frost, not the lowest ranked Big 12 coach. Brett Brennan, who you could not pick out of a lineup, by the way.
I remember that guy's name thanks to you, though.
Ranked 66, and Scott Satterfield ranked 60. So, look, these are all just random made-up numbers. But the genesis of this argument is that Scott Frost has a lot to prove. Fair. I don't know that anyone's arguing that. He does have a lot to prove. His tenure in Nebraska did not go the way he wanted. Obviously, leaving UCF did not turn out to be the right move for Scott Frost. This team has a lot of things that we don't know about it. So to sit here and say that this is the team that we're not quite sure where they are, we're not quite sure what they're going to be, is this going to work out? That's a totally fair critique as it stands right now. Because here's the thing, Trace. You and I, we look at this team as closely as anybody, and we don't know what to expect from this team. I don't expect Tom Fornelli from whatever desk he sits in Memphis, Tennessee, wherever he's at, to know anything more about the team than you and I do. So I think 62 is a fair ranking. Here's what I did find fun, though. So CBS only released rankings 68 to 26. So 10 Big 12 coaches feature in that. Means 6 Big 12 coaches are in the top 5 trades. That would be Kenny Dillingham, Mike Gundy, Matt Campbell, Lance Leopold, Chris Kleiman, and Kyle Whittingham are your top 6 coaches in the Big 12. Deion Sanders ranks 33rd. Rich Rodriguez, 42nd. I thought that was interesting because he's kind of doing the same thing, but he's getting a little extra love because he had some success at Jackson State, which, by the way, I just checked, also not in the Big 12. So I don't know how you extrapolate that out. So some of these are just kind of made up numbers for fodder, but it's not unfair to say UCF is on the back half of some of these things just based on where we are right now.
Well, ESPN college football reporter Andrea Adelson, you read her column recently. This time at UCF, Scott Frost won't need to catch lightning in a bottle. That was the subject of her column. You had opportunity to catch up with Andrea and speak about Coach Frost amongst many topics.
Sure did. Yeah, we're going to post the entire 41-minute conversation starting tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel.
Bright and early.
If you're up early working out at 5 a.m. type person, you have Andrea Adelson to keep you company. If not, here's a quick little snippet. It's about 18, 20 minutes long, and we touch on Scott Frost's hire. And she got to spend some time with him and Mackenzie Milton, Terry Mahajer, and some interesting nuggets here. So here's an excerpt of our conversation coming up with Andrea Adelson. To expect, I guess, to maybe hear from Frost or see from Frost, and how was he different from maybe what you recall from working with him, back about 7, 8 years ago now?
Well, that's a great question. I had a chance when he left UCF to go to Nebraska to actually visit him multiple times while he was at Nebraska because it obviously wasn't going well, and I had a pre-existing relationship with him. And every time we talked, it was, we're this close. We're about to turn a corner. We're about to turn a corner. All those gut-wrenching close games that they lost. I think it's 5-22, if my memory is correct. And in one-score games, you kind of felt, and even the fan base too, they just wanted to give him every shot plus 10 more shots and then 10 more shots after that, to get it right. And so when I sat down with him this time at UCF, I was digging a lot about how are you different? How do you feel like you're different this time around? And he really did not want to talk about Nebraska. He's like, I appreciate that you want to ask me that. I'm not going to answer it. I'm not going to talk about it. And I was like, one more, Scott, hold on. One more. We know each other for a long time. I feel like I can dig a little bit deeper. I think there were little kernels in there in roundabout ways from other things that he said. But I think that he learned, first and foremost, that he needs to be in a place where he can be completely happy. And that was not the case at Nebraska. And I think when he was at UCF, he was happy. He was content. And he felt like his life was good. Now, in terms of what I thought I would hear, I kind of expected to hear what he said. I did not think he was going to sit down and pour his heart out about what happened at Nebraska. I didn't think that he was going to go deep on how that changed his life, because it has to change you in some way when you go back to your alma mater. And that was the home run hire for Nebraska.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. And now it's hard to even go back, right? Hard to even go back for a reunion. I tried calling him several years ago for a 25-year anniversary piece on the 97 split national championship. Did not want to talk about that. So, there have been, I think, a lot of hurt feelings over what happened there. So I wasn't necessarily expecting him to open up about that. How did I find him different? I think he's just has more perspective about where he is in his life right now. I think maybe his priorities are a little bit different than they were the first time around. And I think the one thing that's the same, though, is he is completely determined to win here the way that he was the first time. That to me has not changed. I just think the age, the wisdom, the perspective that you gain when you have an experience that doesn't go your way just inherently makes you different.
Yeah, one of the quotes from the article he says is, I know I'm a wiser person and a smarter football coach. Did he give you kind of any examples, or did you sense in him kind of maybe where he's matured a little bit, or where he's different from the Frost of maybe the Nebraska age, or even from the UCF time?
That's a great question. He didn't give me concrete examples because, of course, I did ask, well, how are you different? And again, Scott is not a guy who's going to be super introspective and go deep on his what maybe other people think are some of his flaws, or where he feels like he's gotten better. We didn't go too deep there, but I think a lot of that has to do with the coaching staff that he surrounded himself with the first time around. And I think making different hires that can support him here at UCF that maybe were different when he was at Nebraska. I think understanding the players better in terms of where they are, meeting them where they are right now in this era of college football. He got a small taste of that at the end of Nebraska. So I think that's another area where he has just better understanding and knowledge over how to deal with the players. So to me, those are just like a couple of examples. And I also think just, the way that he handles adverse situations, the way that he believes now more in terms of like the perspective of the importance of family and making sure that his kids are happy and he's doing things in that way. I don't think he didn't have kids the first time around at UCF. And going through what he went through with his dad passing when he was at Nebraska, having his kids there, I think also changed things a little bit for him in terms of like big picture, which is why we heard him say some of the things that he said at the press conference about being happy, right? Making sure that you're happy first and foremost. And I know the headline, I'm glad you mentioned the headline, the lightning in a bottle. A lot of that has to do with the fact that UCF doesn't have to be perfect and then pray for a chance to make a playoff, right? They win the Big 12, they're in, at least the way that it's set up right now. We know that there's potentially going to be changes somewhere down the road, but I do think there's part of him that wants to recreate that happiness that he had the first time around here and the way that he felt about coaching and the way that he felt about coming into work every single day. I don't think that happiness existed for him in Nebraska because there was all of that pressure involved in that job at the place where you went to school, at the place where your head coach is now kind of still around and you want to please him and make him happy. So I do think there is a little part of him that kind of wants to make it go back to the way it was the first time around, just in terms of what his happiness is going to look like and feel like.
Well, in the article you mentioned his first day on campus, the second time, December 8th, the introductory press conference. He talks about the whirlwind that day was and getting up early and flying across country. And in that press conference, I thought it was interesting. He talked about he was happy at the Rams. He kind of liked what he was doing, but said he would only come back to coach for this job. What do you think UCF was so important to him? Because he probably could have had offers or maybe even stay in the NFL for a while. Why do you think he decided that this was the opportunity right now to come back to UCF? Why do you think he wanted that challenge?
So I asked him that repeatedly because this is a different era of college football than what it was in 2016 and 2017 when he first took the job. I mean, the transfer portal. And I did ask him, like, do you think if the transfer portal existed the way that it does in NIL, that you would have been able to keep the 16 team together headed into 17? Absolutely not. Or even parts of the 15 team headed into 16. So I kept trying to get into his head. You got so many college coaches leaving college to go to the NFL, which is where he was. He made the opposite decision to come back into college. And I agree with you. He did enjoy being in the NFL. He enjoyed that experience with the Rams. I talked to Sean McVay, and he talked about what a great asset it was to have Scott on their staff, not just doing a bunch of different things for them, but just another perspective of a head coach, having kind of sat in that chair. Sean and him could kind of go over some situational things that only a head coach maybe gets on his desk. And so, that was one of the things that stood out in my conversation with Sean. And so I think that Scott had just kind of accepted, all right, I'm going to go the NFL route. I'm going to try this. I'm going to see how it is. He really enjoyed it. And he was going to kind of look for potentially OC jobs here in the near future. But when UCF called, it kind of, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but he went back to what it felt like to be here the first time around and how happy he was, how fulfilled he felt. His wife was happy here when they lived here. Orlando's a great place, and you don't have the pressure of every time you're going out to eat, you're recognized all the time. I'm sure closer to campus, yes, but it's not the way that it was at Nebraska, where he just could not ever go out anywhere because it's a flood of people and they've got the phones out and the cameras and everyone wants a piece of him. And so I think he liked that part of being at UCF, but I also think he felt like he had to bring it back. It was hard for him to see what's happened here over the last couple of years, that the program is not where it was when he left it. And I think somewhere deep inside of him, he felt a responsibility to be the one to show like, no. We can win here. I proved it before, and I'm going to prove it again in a Power Four conference. He doesn't feel like UCF is that far off. He praised the foundation that Gus Malzahn kind of laid to get the program where it is. And I think we all know the financial challenges that kind of came with the last couple of seasons and making that transition. And so Scott was very complimentary of what Gus had been able to do. But I think he feels like UCF shouldn't be a 4-8 team. And I know what it takes to get UCF back to where it was. And I want to accept that challenge. And he wanted to, I think part of him wanted to prove like, I'm not who I was at Nebraska. I'm who I was at UCF. And so I think a lot of that went into his mindset, but there were a lot of conversations. This was not a slam dunk yes right from the beginning. Scott really had to think about this, had to think about whether this is something that he really wanted to do. And at the end of the day, he felt like this was just the right opportunity at the right time.
Well, let's talk about the angle from Terry Mohajir, UCF athletics director, who is often maligned by the fan base, Andrea, largely because he's not Danny White, right? Who was the AD when Scott Frost was here and helped UCF kind of get to that precipice in 2017, and now currently at Tennessee. A lot of positions of power, Andrea, as you know, they like to hire their person, their guy, their coach. And Scott Frost is kind of a throwback to the past of UCF. What does it say about Terry Mohajir that he kind of dips into the past and gets, quote unquote, somebody else's guy to come lead his football program? What does that say about maybe Scott Frost or their connection between those two, or Terry Mohajir in general, that he's willing to take a risk and kind of dip back into the nostalgia play, if you will, to bring back Scott Frost?
Well, I just think it speaks to the urgency to get UCF football right. Because we all know that UCF football is not where it needs to be. And so when you're losing the fan base, right, when you're losing the excitement that has surrounded this program for a long time, that's problematic, particularly in this era when you need to have your fans invested. You need to continue to build with the donations and the fundraising. If you've kind of lost that, you're in trouble. And so I think he understands that Scott brings this magic with him. That yes, it existed in 2016 and 2017, but you said it yourself, the excitement from the fan base for Scott Frost, because everybody remembers what it was like, and everybody understands and realizes it should be like that. It shouldn't be 4-8. It should be 13-0 or 12-1 or even 10-2, right? Because that still gets you a chance to play in a conference championship game based on the way the Big 12 has gone here over the course of essentially its entire history, right? So I think it says that about him. But one of the things I didn't realize during the conversation I had with Terry was there was a conversation several years back with Scott about coming back as the OC under Gus. Gus told Terry, would you mind calling Scott? I have no problem with Scott coming back here to be our offensive coordinator, which again, as you mentioned, coaches who like doing the play calling and then ceding some of that responsibility to the former head coach who was here during the glory days, right? I'm like, wait, you're telling me Gus was okay with this? He said, yes, Gus was okay with it. Because again, I just think it speaks to that special relationship that Scott has had with the fan base and continues to have with the fan base. So I thought that was interesting. And that kind of laid the groundwork, quite honestly, for Terry knowing I'm going to call Scott again, because Scott was like, it's not the right time. It was right after Nebraska. I need some time away, which obviously is understandable because of everything that happened. But Scott spoke very highly about his time at UCF. And so when it came time to start calling candidates, Scott was right at the top of his list. And Terry had hoped that Scott was now more willing to take a look at it after a couple of years away. Time, right? Perspective. And he called other candidates, but as you said, there was only one that could galvanize the fan base like this. But you're also taking a risk, and it is a risk because of what happened at Nebraska and the differences in college football now. But I'll use that in air quotes because he's won here before. And so I think in his mind, and I think he says this in the story, it's not really a risk because they've already seen it happen here before. So why not again? Why not have this something like the magical 2017 season happen again? I will say this though, both Scott and Terry were like, let's just be clear. Like, nobody's saying we're going to go 13-0 in like year one, right? Like, and I'm like, okay, year two. That's what I said to Scott. He's like, okay, yeah, no pressure. I'm like, well, it was year two last time. But, I think they both understand that, yes, you can flip a roster really quickly in today's college football world. But what he's trying to do is not flip a roster for like a year or two. I think Scott really is committed to being here beyond 2 seasons. Now, I sit here now and say that things could change, obviously, but I didn't get any sort of sense that he's in it for the short term and he's looking for the next big thing. And I think that's always been kind of the issue at UCF is when your coach does have a lot of success. Oh gosh, who's going to take him? Well, now UCF is in a power conference, right? Like, and he was at Nebraska. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe this is a much better place for him for a whole bunch of reasons. So I didn't get any sort of sense that like he's going to be 1 or 2 and done, that he's committed not just for a good year, but for a decade of good years.
Andrew, I think one of the themes that we've picked up on from this staff, this team, is a little bit of a chip on the shoulder mentality, right? Seems like Coach Frost has that. Seems like McKenzie has that. A guy who you didn't quote in the article, I don't know if you spent time with him, Alex Grinch, who's obviously had a tough run at defensive coordinator position, chip on the shoulder. Do you get the sense that this is a coaching staff and kind of a team, kind of a rebuild with a chip on the shoulder with something to prove, and that Coach Frost is looking for like-minded folks, both in his, his coaching staff and on the field, to kind of have that same sort of mentality of chip on the shoulder and let's fight for everything, let's earn everything from that standpoint?
Absolutely. I mean, UCF thrived best when they were an underdog, right? I mean, when nobody was kind of believing in them in 2017. I mean, even in 2018, even though they were favored in the majority of their games, nobody wanted them to be in the playoff. Nobody wanted them to be, at the top. And so you always had that mindset and mentality. Once you get into the power conferences, though, right? It's like, well, we're like one of the power teams now. Like, where's the underdog status? We've actually arrived, right? And so I don't think that's how Scott Frost and Mackenzie Milton and a lot of the staff, as you mentioned, and some of the players feel, right? I mean, there are still players on this team that weren't recruited by the teams they felt should have recruited them, right? You're always going to have that in any program, any team. But Mackenzie certainly had that when he was a player here. Scott, obviously, his playing career was a little bit different because of where he was. But I just feel like the mentality of UCF as a program, believing in themselves as underdogs, it always has helped lift them to higher places. And I do think there's a part of Scott, as I mentioned earlier, that feels like he's got to prove that he still knows how to coach. And Terry and I talked about this extensively because I asked him that. I'm like, do you feel like Scott has something to prove? Because his last stint, everyone just kind of thought he was bad because it didn't work at Nebraska. And that was supposed to be a great hire, and it didn't work out. And he said, anytime you don't have success, there's always something inside of you that feels like you've got to prove it to yourself, to others, that you can still do it. And so Scott didn't say that out loud, but I certainly do believe that there is part of him that's like, I don't forget how to coach. I know how to coach. I know what I'm doing. My system and my scheme works. And it's going to look different than what it looked under Gus. There's no question about that. But there is a confidence and belief in what they're doing, and it's fine if nobody believes in them. And I think they probably prefer it that way.
All right, last one. Fill in the blank for me. This season for UCF football will be a success if blank.
I feel like I'm going to give a cliche here and say if UCF plays and starts one quarterback the entire season. Now, that's a cliche. I know that's a cliche. But so much of the success that UCF has had in its past has been when they have had a quarterback who is good to elite and is the starter for the entire season, right? Don't have injury, you don't play musical quarterbacks. I'm not sure. Whether it was Blake Bortles or McKenzie or, fill in the blank, right? So, that's what I will say. And I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out or a cliche or anything like that. But the quarterback position at UCF has been so vital. and you've got Mackenzie Milton and Scott Frost, two former quarterbacks who are basically in charge. You cannot get quarterback wrong, right? That's the one thing. You cannot get quarterback wrong. So that's why I'm putting it all on the quarterback. Sorry, whoever the quarterback will be.
You can't get quarterback wrong. She didn't agree with the 4 quarterbacks that started a season ago. What did you make of the statement that she had there that Scott Frost praised Gus Malzahn for the foundation laid? Is that something just politically correct of Scott Frost to say, or is there something inside of him that feels that Gus has laid something here that he can build upon?
I'm going to go that's more nicety than not. But I do think the transition from Group of 5 to Power 4 probably had some things underneath it that we didn't get to see that Gus had to set up. So I assume he's tipping his cap to Gus at least getting UCF into the conference and getting some things started. But I think it's mostly pleasantries and niceties. I don't know how much that would be accurate. But man, oh man, the alternate universe of Scott Frost calling plays for Gus Malzahn. Where was that in our content life, Chase? Because that would have been a fantastic run of shows.
The full interview. What else do you touch on with Andrea? It's going to drop at 5 a.m. on
5
Sun's
a.m.,
YouTube.
get up
so when
early.
you wake up in the morning, when you're doing your gym workout, you'll be able to listen to the full interview. What else do you touch on with Andrea?
Early and often there, yeah, some more Nebraska talk there. She talks a little bit about Mackenzie and what she learned about talking with him, his time on staff. Also some Gus Malzahn conversation. She shares some insight on why Gus may have made this decision. As for those who don't know, Andrea covers the ACC by trade on a daily basis, just happens to live in Orlando. So very plugged into that scene. So she offers some context on maybe why Gus decided that he wanted to take off from UCF. So 5 a.m., you'll see that tomorrow on our YouTube channel. I'll get it on the podcast feed at some point too. I forgot to do that today, but at some point it'll be on the podcast player as well. And again, big thanks to Andrea. Find that article on ESPN.com.
I don't like to tell you how to do your job, but if you just drop Nebraska in any headline, you're going to get all those Cornhusker freaks that come out.
Well, that's the thing is the headline here, spoiler alert, is that there isn't any headline. Like as she said there, he refuses to talk about it. And I pressed her on how she pressed him. And she was like, look, he doesn't want to talk about it. He's not talking about it. He's not bringing it up. There was a quote in the article that basically said, you can think what you want, but I'm not talking about this. It doesn't do me any good. And so that's the headline, is that he chooses to not even acknowledge Nebraska, which is going to make Nebraska fans absolutely crazy. But she acknowledges that he wants no part of talking about it. And she walks through how she redirected questions and tried to ask it a different way. And every time she got met with the Heisman, and he was not interested in talking Nebraska.
You know, the part I also found interesting there, it reminds me of when Kaká played for Orlando City. He talked about just always having been in the spotlight during his playing career. Then when he comes to the MLS, he's able to be in a place like Winter Park, sit outside, have a cup of coffee, and no one really bothered him. And I thought that was interesting. There's nowhere that Scott Frost could have gone in Nebraska and not been recognized. But you've heard him talk about running into Wawa with his ball cap down, and nobody's even paying attention to him in Orlando.
Yeah, look, I think making this decision was also a quality of life decision, right? And they've talked about, you know, raising their family here. She mentions in that piece, you know, Scott had just had his first child when he left her the first time, now 3 kids. You know, his wife has been way more visible than she had been in the previous stint. So I think there's an element of this kind of a maturing process and now wanting to find a place to set up roots. I thought it was interesting. She talked about, you know, Scott Frost. I'm not sure if it was a quote she gave him or if it was just her interpretation, but wanting to get things fixed here at UCF because he this place meant something to him. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm not sure if that's his thought process. I'm not sure how much that drags into it, but that's really interesting to think about. If he looked at this from afar and said, man, we got to get that thing right over there, and got the phone call, and then calls up the Mackenzies who would have the same thought process, calls the Sean Becktons who would have the same process, calls the Jordan Johnsons, the Drico Johnsons, or Dimitri Brims, the Travis Fishers, and says, let's get this thing right again. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's an element of that too, but if that's the case, you got to feel good as a Knight fan that he's kind of bringing together the band of brothers, if you will, that are here to kind of right the ship, and that they all saw what was happening from afar and said, you know, this can't stand. We have to get in there now. We have to make things right.
I do believe that in him. So I think that connects with the UCF fan base. I think there is a belief that's authentic on his part. Going to be interesting. You mentioned Mrs. Frost. Will there be a ladies' night football scrimmage or something? Haven't heard anything yet. As summer approaches, it'd be interesting to see if she connects with the fan base. I don't recall her doing anything like that during her first stint in Orlando, but maybe I've forgotten. Stay with us here on Sons of UCF Live. Big news coming up, but we put a bow on spring camp, our series of reports. We look back at the running back position through the eyes of Andrew Cherico.
Could you see Fast be returning? Andrew Cherico here for the Sons of UCF. After RJ Harvey got drafted in the second round to the Denver Broncos, no current UCF running back is going to replicate one of the greatest seasons in program history. This time, it'll be a committee effort between the veterans and the newcomers who can do it all.
I like to have, I want to say 5. I want to say everybody in my room, from freshman to senior. I mean, I told my guys after spring ball, there's no young guys anymore. You know what I mean? In this day and age, we're one play away. You know what I mean? And so my guys, I feel like they are able to, grasp and have understanding, and that's our standard. You know what I mean? And that's the trust that we got to have in whoever's in the game.
This offense, we go pretty fast, and our coaches expect us to give 100% effort. So he probably already told you, everybody, you know what I mean? Everyone's going to get used at some point, right? It may not be a handoff. You might just have to block real quick, right? But everyone's going to get used just by the nature of the way we play the game.
Work towards something bigger than just myself, too. You know what I mean? It's a team sport. So, I want to be All-American, Offensive Player of the Year, whatever the case may be. All that's cool, but at the end of the day, it's a team game. I want to win with the team. Aim for a 16-0 season, you know what I mean? Or at least something close or similar to that, you know what I mean? I want to win, not just for myself, but for the team and with the team as well.
Effort, you know what I mean? You got to give 100% effort, you know what I mean? And you can't coach effort, you know what I mean? Something with effort is in you. And I think those guys in the running back room right now are trying to have that extreme effort, that extreme talent to just be able to do whatever is needed of them.
Returning redshirt senior Miles Montgomery is leading the charge for this running back room, along with veteran Jaden Nixon. But there are also 3 young running backs flourishing with potential who you could see on the field this year, beginning with Stacey Gage, who showed some of the best breakaway speed, resulting in some long touchdowns during camp. Second, Day, also known as AG, who his teammates told us to look out for. And last but not least, Tavion Swint, who was limited in camp due to injury, but is a 4-star recruit and looks to be a hometown hero. And until next time, I'm Andrew Cherico for the Sons of UCF.
AC Andrew Cherico sporting the icy white polo for this week's report. He got the easier assignment, by the way, to recap the running backs, as we'll explain in a moment. Some news Thursday. Hey, remember Ted Roof? Who could forget his 8-game tenure as
Do you remember Ted Roof? I mean, you
I
remember.
Okay, I remember.
Making sure.
Orlando Sentinel reporting this Thursday. Orange County judge denied a motion to dismiss a breach of contract lawsuit filed by Ted Roof. UCF Athletics has 20 days to respond. I don't know who I'm rooting for here. I mean, I guess I'm rooting for UCF, but I find the whole lawsuit just interesting.
I need a trial. I need you to be called to the stand.
2027 is when this is on the docket.
I don't know. I need this.
How is this in 2027? We're deporting people all over the world in 20 minutes, but somehow,
whenever it is, I need the state calls Trey Strelko to the stand. I need you up there. I need you wearing a distribution of task shirt. But I will say this: our friend Jim Hadaway at J Hadaway on Twitter put this into English for us. He tweeted earlier. This order means that Roof brought a legally sufficient complaint. It does not mean that he is correct. It does not mean that UCF is lost. So for context, for those of us who are not the legalese that Trey Strelko is, this just means that the suit can go forward, which my dream of getting Trey Strelko on the witness stand continues forward.
What am I going to testify to?
That's a great question. I cannot wait to find out. You can't tell us now because you'll impugn yourself. So let's wait till the stand. Yes, don't tell me now.
And don't watch anymore. I don't want to, affect the jury pool for this high profile. Is this a jury or is this a
I hope it's a jury trial. I hope it's a jury trial and somebody asks him his 4-3 defensive scheme. I just really hope that's what we get into at this trial. Fantastic. I need JP Gilbert. I know he's more of a criminal lawyer. I need him to switch professions or get some sort of new experience. I need him trying this case on our behalf. We win this case if JP Gilbert is trying it for UCF, hands down.
Ted Roof.
Just nothing but game tape from some of those defensive performances.
We show you the performance. Guilty.
Yes, 1,000%.
Award to UCF. When we're doling out the assignments on, recapping spring camp, Dwayne Jones got the short end. Really, he drew special teams. Okay, so let's go through special teams. There were only a couple of players in the special teams unit, and those guys are gone. So. Dwayne Jones recaps special teams through spring camp and where things go from here.
Special teams coordinator Pete Alomar did not have much to work with this spring as his room was incredibly slim. Now, this summer, kickers Grant Reddick and Kevin Kerrigan are no longer on this roster. I'm Dwayne Jones with the Sons of UCF, and this special teams unit has endured lots of change, but they were able to dip into the transfer portal and grab JMU kicker Noah Rules and Ohio State punter Anthony Veneri ahead of the fall.
Today's environment, you're always working a board and looking, and who's where and that kind of thing. And, at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure that we've got 2 kickers that can help us win, 2 punters that can help us win, and 2 snappers that can help us win. And, that's where the room will be, by the time we come back for summer. So, I'm looking for a guy with a repeatable swing. I'm looking for a guy that's got good leg strength. I'm looking for somebody that when I talk to him, just understands the mental side of the game and is willing to work on that too, because that's a huge part of what we do. As much as we talk about fundamentals and kicking the ball and punting the ball, it's the mental side of this game in that world lives large too.
Coach Alomar also acquired Dalton Riggs from BYU to fill the long snapper gap on the roster. He's hoping that the acquisitions he's made will mold into a unit and be one that the Knights can rely on when the season rolls around. I'm Dwayne Jones with the Sons of UCF.
How's your repeatable swing?
Not great. No, not great. Not good at all. Hopefully Noah Rules, or I think we just call him No Rules. I think we should really just make
is that the pronunciation?
That's what Dwayne just said. He seems like a very studious individual who would look something like this up. So Noah Rules is where I'm going there, but I think No Rules is a better way to phrase that.
You'll find all of the camp reports, if you have missed any, on the UCF Sons of UCF's YouTube channel. So you'll catch all that. What Trace made? Oh yeah, I did. I did make Dana. I saved this. Hi, Patrick. I saved a playoff shirt for the Orlando Magic from when I went to the game a couple of weeks ago and brought it with me because I knew Patrick and Dana would be at the yard sale. Wow. And that may have been the best find that Dana had all day.
Look at you.
When I presented that shirt.
Buy and fanned. I love it. Love it.
Changing sports, softball with 5 straight NCAA tournament appearances. I'll tell you what, they survived on elimination day there on Saturday and on Friday. Forced the matchup with Texas. Tough to face the number 3 team. They lost that one. They were close there for a while, back and forth, and then just kind of ran out of steam. But 35-24-1, a successful season. When you say a successful season, all things considered, for the Knights, I mean, you can't judge it based on whether you win the whole thing, right? This was a successful season for Cindy Ball Malone and her crew.
Yeah, 500 in conference, right? A tough conference with a lot of tough competition, playing number 3 Texas at home, essentially, right? It was their regional, right? So it was a home game for Texas on that Sunday. A tough loss to Michigan early on. They battled back. They beat them a second time, which is, which was fun. So this team went down battling. I think at the end they just ran out of gas and not enough pitching and not enough timely hitting. Texas was on a streak, and but 500 in conference. The 5th straight postseason appearance for the lady softball here. I think it's hard to argue that Cindy Ball Malone continues to be the most successful coach on campus. And I don't think you can look at this season any other way than successful. I don't know how you look at this and say, what a disappointment this is, because Eric Lopez, star of Around the Kingdom, by the way, told us all year long that this was a young team that was going to have to kind of gel and figure it out. And time again, when the bell needed to be answered, this team did that. And so despite the fact that maybe it didn't end the way we all would have wanted to, what the expectations were coming in, I think this is absolutely a successful season for UCF softball.
Well, Elo was on the post-game Zoom session, and courtesy of the folks at the Black and Gold Banneret, this sound from Cindy Ball Malone following the loss to Texas.
UCF is still young. We're a very young, not only program, but school and institution. And then you go about our team. These 2 young ladies played a lot last year, but even they were in completely different roles this year. So it just speaks to how much we've accomplished. And we went into the season graduating 11 really good seniors and thinking, okay, what are we going to do? And they did the thing. So they definitely left us better than they found us. And I'm excited to celebrate them and then, continue to be building.
They continue to build strong recruiting classes and success. This, again, another NCAA tournament appearance. You feel good about the future of UCF softball as long as you have Cindy Ball Malone at the helm, but it is a strong program for many years. Not as strong this season. Baseball, second year in the Big 12 under Rich Wallace. Hey, the Knights won their last game, 11-7 over Baylor, but BYU took care of things with Texas Tech. And as the tournament now going on in Texas, it is UCF not a part of things. Of course, it's a single elimination this season, so I don't know with the way it started whether we had been talking about UCF still playing, but UCF does not even make the Big 12 championship. Nick Williams, who along with Andrew Gregg covered things all season for the Suns, recaps where the Knights finished.
A win in the season finale, a case of too little too late for a UCF baseball team that lost 21 of 30 conference games and found themselves on the outside looking into a Big 12 championship. I'm Nick Williams reporting for the Sons of UCF outside of John Uliano Park, where the Knights were very frustrated. A series loss and a season full of missed chances was the way the Knights' 2025 season came to a close.
Yeah, I mean, you go back in the middle there, you can talk about Thursday night and that stuff, but there's 6, 7, 8 games in the middle of the year that we talk about winning games you feel like you should win. Like, we lost games we had won, and that's hard to deal with. And it's going to be hard to sit here and watch the conference tournament on TV, and it's going to be even harder to watch the selection show. And goal is to never let that happen again.
Yeah, just not making it. There's some games that we should have won that just didn't go our way, which is frustrating when you give everything you got and it just doesn't go your way.
I'm proud to a certain extent. I'm really happy the guys I was always around, and made a lot of great friendships that'll be for life, and get to really be around great coaching staff and just great people at UCF in general. But I think there's always going to be a little void that's going to be missing from this year.
A lot of uncertainty surrounds the Knights' 2026 roster, as a lot of players are draft eligible, 10 seniors are leaving the program, and of course there's always the option of the transfer portal. Pressure will increase on head coach Rich Wallace heading into his third year coaching a team that is waiting patiently for its breakthrough in the Big 12. For the Sons of UCF, I'm Nick Williams.
I want to thank Andrew Gregg, Nick Williams for their coverage of UCF baseball all season. Of course, you can remake your roster fairly quickly with the portal, and right, so you can go from out to back in, but work needs to be done for the Knights going into year 3 in the Big 12.
Well, I think there also needs to be looked at the way Rich Wallace schedules. This team plays kind of cupcakey, if you will, very early in the season. Give them some credit for the Florida, Miami midweek kind of games, but first couple of seasons, here's a fun stat for you, Trace. Season long, so every game played, looking at Big 12 teams, UCF was ranked 3rd in ERA. Just conference opponents alone, UCF ranks 9th. So I think that tells you they've got to find a way to figure out who this team is early on. They played a lot of cupcakes, Siena, the usual, beat down the Bryants of the world, and we were getting fat and happy off those wins. Conference time comes around, we don't know who we have, and now you can't adjust late. So I think Rich Wallace maybe takes a page from Cindy Malone, who is historically scheduled tougher, to figure out who she has and who can kind of step up for her team. Maybe there needs to be a page out of that book for Rich Wallace and the Knights, because I think while we were all happy after Bryant and Siena, now we're sitting here with with nothing to show for it. So perhaps maybe a scheduling philosophy change is in order for the Knights.
Knights were 16-4 at one point, finished 29-26. You can do the math there, and 9-21. In the Big 12. Not going to be good enough. All right. I don't know. I was out of town for a couple of days. I don't know much about what went on with the Pegasus podcast this week, except they're talking about hate lists. I don't understand what that means. Have you listened? Do you understand?
I do.
They're hating? I saw there was a poll question of some sort.
They each drafted things that they hate as UCF fans. So they each got options to draft some stuff. I'm an impartial observer of these things, but there is a groundswell on Twitter led by one JP Gilbert that says that Bailey trounced Christian in this draft. Had the better items that people hate more so than Christian.
Do you remember? I didn't look. I saw the poll question.
Votes are still being tallied. I mean, I can't produce the show on the fly, Trace. I think you put it on there. Twitter's been broken today for some reason, by the way.
Twitter's been broken for a long time.
Great, even better. Something about a hacking. My messages aren't showing up. I don't know. There's a whole bunch.
You've been hacked.
Well, I'm not hacked. Somebody hacked Twitter. I'm not sure who hacked. That wasn't me.
Good. Bring that thing down.
I mean, okay. Well, that's unfortunate for the rest of us here. So if you want to filibuster for like 6 seconds, I'll see if I can find this list for you.
I don't know.
Here we go. All right, never mind. Stop filibustering. All right, here we go. Bailey's top 5 things that people hate. Number 5, Maury Povich being the guest picker. Number 4, CFB committee circa 17-18. Number 3, being called the Golden Knights. Number 2,
I'm with him on that.
Gus Malzahn's offensive play calling. And number 1, the current state of UCF athletics. That's his top 5. Christian top 5. Number 5, other schools having more money than us. Number 4, the big fair. 3. Number 3, the Baylor loss in 2023. Number 2, Cincinnati. Number 1, the Cows.
See, there's some recency bias in that. I mean, I don't think the Baylor loss, and we can debate this maybe on Around the Kingdom coming up next week. I don't think it's as bad as that loss in Tampa to South Florida, that 64-12. That was a demoralizing loss. I know that things changed over the course of that season, but that was a terrible loss. And nobody named that pinhead Matt Grothe of South Florida. I hate that guy.
Make your own list.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do that.
I mean, I don't.
But this is not a clip of. This is the clip. This is you do the read here.
Yeah, welcome to the show. I'm Adam. You're Trace. This is how this works. All right, here's this week's Who Said It from your friends at the Pegasus.
My favorite
podcast.
part is your read.
Available, by the way, wherever you get your quality podcast. And
I like it with your dulcet tones.
And on the Suns UCF YouTube, the quote is, "UCF fans are monsters."
Oh, wow. Every fan base has some.
UCF fans are monsters.
It really could be either of them.
That's how this works every week, by the way.
That sounds more like Christian to me, though. He has a disdain for a portion of the fan base.
Like UCF fans are monsters because of all this.
Got him. All right. Congratulations.
The streak is over.
Simmons. We finally did it.
That sounds like Christian, though, doesn't it?
It could, but again, Bailey was clearly.
I love when Trace hates him. I don't have a lot of hate. I'm skeptical by nature. I don't like a lot of people, but I don't hate anybody really. But Matt Grothe, I can't stand that guy.
I don't doubt it. By the way, I think so. I haven't spent a ton of time with Bailey, but I think he was in such a bad place coming up with his top 5 hate list that. Kind of a personality flip. You ever seen the movie Face Off where they change faces? I feel like that may have happened on this week's Pegasus podcast.
That gives me
Trace
an
hates
idea.
finger food. There we go.
That's true. There's no secret about that. All right. Pegasus podcast. I can now listen to it sometime over this weekend. All right. Some news and notes.
Tony Johnson. This is C.J. Walker. This is Andrea Adelson. My name is Brandon Mahan. You watching the Suns of UCF Live. You're watching the Suns of UCF Live. You're watching the Suns of UCF Live. You're watching Sons of UCF Live. You're watching the Sons of UCF Live.
It's a who's who of who's not. Oh my goodness, Jesus!
If they didn't have their names in there, I was curious to see who could actually identify any of those people.
CJ, you could pass on campus and you'd know him. Several of these other guys, I think you wouldn't even notice. That's the way this is going to be from now on.
Well, none of them are on campus anymore, so you're not going to pass.
No, I know, but CJ, you'd recognize. CJ's, he's not allowed.
I think Jamil Reynolds ended up being a cow at some point, actually. Tony Johnson fell off the face of the earth. Isaiah Adams, I think, is still playing someplace. I think one of the MAC schools, I believe.
Buffalo. Wasn't he?
No, he transferred after that, too. Toledo, maybe?
Not a Buffalo? Oh
no, he was a Buffalo, and now he's at Toledo, I believe.
Wow. 14th ranked rowing. Knights Big 12 champions. How about that, huh? Who had that on their bingo card? Big 12 champs for rowing. They are now a part of the NCAA
Listen.
championship at Lake Mercer in New Jersey beginning May 30th. Yes. Listen.
Lake Mercer is where it all goes down. Listen, let's have some self-respect here. None of us care about rowing. I saw all of you cheering on this championship on rowing.
Are you happy they won? You're happy they won.
I love when the Knights win anything, but let's not all pretend like we were tracking rowing all season long and we're gonna hang the banner. Let's stop. It's okay. We won.
We didn't lead the show with it.
Okay. Do other people lead the show with rowing?
Well, that may be. 16th ranked men's tennis, second highest in program history. That's their final ranking. Women's tennis finishes 21st rank. Not a bad spring when you add up rowing and softball and the tennises and women's golf. Softball freshman pitcher Isabella Vega, Softball America's freshman team All-American. Great honor for her. Baseball, shortstop Antonio Jimenez, all Big 12 second team. That's the best that could be for the Knights with second team. Couple of honorable mentions: outfielder Andrew Williamson, outfielder Diamas Ross, second baseman Eddie Espinal, and catcher Dylan King. Honorable mentions. The Knights will need more of those first and second team guys a season from now. They want to reverse that 9-21. Just ahead, a reminder, a shakeup in the Suns universe. We're going to tell you all about that coming up. But it is that time again. I saw Brian W. Peterson spending a lot of money over at the yard sale this weekend. This is his favorite segment.
So it's a mailbag. So what?
So what? Do you know whose mailbag that is?
It's that time again. Time to open the Brian W. Peterson Sons of UCF mailbag.
Speaking of Brian, I saw a picture. It looked like he stopped going to the barber and started going to the gym instead. I mean, it looked like you've been hitting the weights and not hitting the haircut.
Oh, he was showing off. There was no dapper suit. He was all about the show off. JP Gilbert prompts a question I have for you. His question is Trace coming to Miami and not reaching out to me, the biggest betrayal in UCF history, down in Miami at the home of the Marlins to see the Cubs take 2 out of 3 over the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. My question, no, I can't see everybody that I know everywhere all the time. But this begs this question: as your daughter will be attending UCF, your family will be making trips here. What's the obligation to visit with me, to see me, to let me know, for me to visit with you? I'll be up in Jacksonville in a couple of weeks. Should I hang out? Should I swing by? What are we required to do? Okay. What are we required to do?
Listen.
I stopped in Burger U to give Dana her shirt. I did not see Brian W. Peterson. And then he texted me, "Where are you?" I turned around and you were gone from Burger U. I didn't even see him. I didn't know. He had mentioned he was coming up, but okay, let me know when you're here. What are the obligations here of visiting? Just so we're clear, am I to be offended when you come and visit your daughter and don't tell me you're up the street? Can we get that out of the way since JP's offended?
A lot of questions got thrown at me there. I think in this situation, you owe JP, you robbed him of one of the greatest things that you can do for a human being. That's to decline an invitation nicely. All you had to do was just tell JP
that shunned us when we were down at the.
Also fair, FAU. He did not show up at the FAU tailgate because there was a drop of rain. But you owed him a, "Hey man, I'm in town to watch the game," to allow him to cook up the excuse and why he wasn't going to see you. That's the transaction here, Trace. That's what he's upset about. Is you robbed him of the ability to come up with an A+ reason why he was not going to come see you. Yes,
that's fair. Fair. That's fair.
Now, in terms of your trip to Jacksonville, when is that? When are you going to be up here?
June, I think 2020. It's work related.
Okay,
but I'll be there.
Ooh, I'm actually going to be in Denver that week.
How convenient of you to announce that 3.5 weeks ahead.
No, I actually was just talking about that with my one of my
on a Thursday.
Today. So I fly out on a Monday. I get back on a Wednesday-ish. I don't know exactly the time of the meeting.
I drive over on Thursday. I come back on Sunday.
You can pick me up from the airport then. Perfect. I'll see you Thursday.
Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to hang out? Are you inviting me over? Do you need to politely decline?
If you'd like to come, listen. The family here loves you. I mean, everyone loves Trace Strelko. You're
Sunday, maybe Sunday.
I'm big day.
Tied up Thursday, Friday, Saturday for sure.
So Uncle Trace is always welcome here in the Eaton household. I'll definitely be here on Sunday. So if you want to grab some food, we can throw some.
I'm downtown. You're south of downtown, right? So you're on my way back.
South of downtown. Yeah. Well. So I'm not even in Jacksonville technically. I'm in Ponte Vedra.
So I saw Brian back on this topic. So I saw Brian at the yard sale, right?
But you said you didn't see Brian.
Really. Not at the yard sale. Well, he came over and he was hanging out in the club there at baseball, and then messaged me, and then came down and visited. I was driving back from Miami. I went through Port St. Lucie, where he resides. I texted him, waving at you. So I did a little bit better with him than JP. Was I required to visit? I didn't get an invite. He knew I was driving.
Yeah, story's got holes in it per Mario here. Listen, I think if you're driving through, you don't owe anybody. I'm driving through your town. If you're going to be
it was
there,
night. It was late. It was late.
If you're going to be there for more than like a 36
No,
hours,
I apologize to JP.
I think you owe them the right to refuse to see you. Right? That's what you're owed, especially JP Gilbert. Like this is his Super Bowl. Like
this is a week after I said that I would stay in a
he can't wait for someone to reach out to him so he can say, "I don't want to hang out with you." That's what he's here for. So when you rob him of that, Trace, that's just that's the ultimate betrayal.
I'll fess up to that one. That was I own that one. UCF_Zach. How many wins would UCF need to get this season for UCF would need to get this season for Trace to eat some kind of messy finger food on Sons of UCF Live? And the response to that is 17. Can they win 17 games? Huh?
That seems unlikely. No finger food. Messy is the word I'm interested. Like, what do you when you read this question from our good friend UCF Zach, and you saw messy?
Well, ask good questions. I appreciate
that. He's a solid questioner. Yeah. When you saw the word messy, what were you thinking? What food popped in your brain?
Ribs, chicken wings.
I'm
not gonna do it.
Okay,
it's not important enough to me.
Not gonna ask you to. Unless we go 17-0. Now everyone's heard it, by the way. So if we go 17-0, like
I'll eat whatever the hell you want.
Is Tony Roma's still around the rib joint? Because if not, we need to fire up Tony Roma's and get you a slab of ribs right there on the show. Is Tony Roma still around? Somebody Google that for me.
I don't know.
Bobby Rubino's. Am I the only?
Aren't you the fat guy? We need a fat guy for this show that tracks these things.
You said fact guy, right? Not fat guy. Fact, because I could serve multiple purposes, just so you know. Fact guy. Bobby Rubino's. Anyone? No? Ring a bell?
At Golden Knight _2. Is this the worst UCF athletics has performed as a whole? Baseball, football, men's and women's basketball, volleyball, men's and women's soccer, all disappointed. But Golden Knight. Rowing is your Big 12 champions.
Oh, wow. This guy was rowing again.
Women's golf, and there's men's and women's tennis, and there's softball success. I think what do you think, though, on the merits of the question? I mean, it's just year 2 in the Big 12, right? There's transition. I do think it ups the pressure in year 3. You got to see some progress here, right? Terry Modgers made a change in coach in volleyball, so I guess that coach gets a little bit of a pass, but I feel like the pressure is amped up on Rich Wallace in season 3. With baseball. So I don't know. I think to your point that rowing is just not a high profile sport, not a attendance sport. And so it's, you want them to win, but you don't get to see it really. And these other high profile sports need to do better.
Tough question to answer because I went back to try to research. And the statistical measurements of some of the volleyball and baseball and softball from prior years isn't as good as you might expect. I think this is probably it because there were expectations. Right? I think in the early 90s, early 2000s, I think UCF was the up-and-coming school, right? Now we have expectations that we're going to be good. Baseball was supposed to be good this year. We expect a lot out of softball. We thought football was going to be good. You never really know what you're going to get out of basketball. I think there was an expectation this year. So I think relative to expectations, this may be right up there. But it's also a tad of an incomplete answer because I can't research so many years back to determine, what were we thinking about the 1987 volleyball squad? I don't have that. But I will say of recent years,
expectations were high.
This feels like and why wouldn't they be, by the way? We have volleyball in 1987. Somebody looked that up, but we did?
Sure.
You sure? Do we have softball in 87?
No.
Well, exactly. Well, that's what you're saying. Sure, as if it's a possibility. I'm just saying it may not be. Yes, I think because the expectations, this might just be one of the worst runs UCF's had for a calendar sports season.
It doesn't help baseball, doesn't make the Big 12 championship. BYU, Cincinnati, Houston do, and they all win their first round games. So that's a little salt in the wound. But Black Gold _ad. How much of a raise bonus should Timo give Cindy Ball Malone to keep her at UCF? Is she here next year? A 2-part question there. I would make her one of the highest paid coaches in the Big 12. Just put her salary up there with what the others who have made the NCAA tournament.
You and I are on the same page, Trace, because I did some research.
That's what she should be.
I did some research here. If the facts are correct,
a lot of research by you this week.
I had some time in my hands today. According to Jason Beatty, when he was still with the Orlando Sentinel, he reported Sydney Bob Malone making $200,000 a year, so $200K. according to Front Office Sports, the top 20 college softball coaches, the number 20th coach on that list makes $255K. The number 15 coach makes $300K. So if you think Sydney Balbalone is a top 20, top 15 coach, that means she gets anywhere between a $50,000 and $100,000 raise to get her into that echelon.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I think is
top 30 program and qualify for the NCAA tournament. So yeah, that's where I would up her, and I can't imagine she's not going to get a call from somewhere, right? That's somebody's going to want her. Brian Peterson, if you could have any one thing from the athletics yard sale, what would it be? You saw some of the pictures posted. Did you talk to anybody that went to the yard sale? Did you get any feedback?
I talked to Brian, actually. Brian had some stuff he bought. I saw some belly aching on Twitter about multiple purchases and things of that nature. I wasn't the information I saw seemed to think that there was some disappointment at certain points in time. So I don't really have much insight there. I would tell you, like I said last week, give me something unique, something rare, something you can't find everywhere, something that's silly and someone's going to go, where did you get that thing from? And I want to say, hey, I went to the yard sale in 2020, whatever, and I bought this item. So give me something unique, something rare. I'll know it when I see it. I don't have it for you off the top of my head.
I went with friends, and I'm not sure entirely what I expected, but I'm not a big shopper. But I like to go in. I like to see a sign that tells me where something is. And this is just tables of stuff, and people were in a frenzy. It looked like piranhas in a tank. It just was a mess that I just shut down. I went, no, I'm not digging through anything. In short, Trace's issues. What is that?
I don't know. So no purchases were made? No, your wallet?
No, I shut down early and often when I saw people running around.
Did you see any items that you were like, oh, that's cool, or that's interesting?
Yeah, but I'm just not interested enough in dropping what Christian dropped for a helmet.
I saw you had a helmet. Yeah.
Oof.
Look at that guy, huh?
Yeah.
Employment.
I'd rather watch the Cubs one out from victory on Monday night, blow it with a 2-run single by the Marlins, and lose 8-7.
A helmet in this economy? Good for Christian.
That's how I spend my money. At Scott 88513, would you guys become Rays fans if they move to Orlando? I'm a Cubs fan. I've never disliked the Rays, so probably I'd be happy for them if they win. I'd probably go to more games than I'm able to go with where they are. Tampa now, St. Petersburg before. I don't know that I'd become a fan. Be a little bandwagon. If they did well, then I'd be happy for them. Baseball guy.
No. And here the reality is the last couple of times I've moved, I live in non-baseball markets. So, I mean, there's nothing really baseball related here in Jacksonville. We don't get the Rays. We don't get the Marlins. I'm kind of boxed out from some stuff too. So maybe
get the Braves. Get Braves games?
I don't think we get the Braves either. No. If I lived in a baseball centric market, perhaps I'd be more interested in following baseball. But since I don't now, the answer is no. If I ever moved to Orlando and the Rays were there, maybe you've got a better chance. But my answer is probably no.
At Nights with a 1 there on Blue Sky. 1 ice cream flavor and only 1 for the rest of your life. What is it?
Fun fact, I don't really like ice cream. That's the thing.
Whoa.
I'm more of a brownie.
Lactose intolerance issue?
No, I'm more of a brownie, cake, cookie, cupcake kind of guy. I don't like sherbet. Maybe it's the texture, the coldness. I don't even know what that is. If I had to pick
Italian ice?
No, I hate Italian ice. What a ripoff that thing is.
Whoa.
If I had to pick, Cold Stone used to have a chocolate fudge brownie ice cream that was good. So I would go with that. Nice chocolate fudge brownie ice cream.
What about that ice cream of the future? The Dippin' Dots.
No, my kids love that crap. Is that real? I'm sure it's like
that.
I'm sure it's like paint thinner. I have no idea what it is. But they eat it by the gallons, and I'm sure they're going to be okay.
I know this is a boring answer, but cookie dough, any kind of cookie dough, I'm fine with. So
that's it. I mean, that's not surprising. When's the last time you had ice cream?
A couple weeks ago.
Are you waffle cone, regular cone? You want a bowl?
I like waffle cone.
I
like waffle cone. Yeah.
Sprinkles? No sprinkles?
No sprinkles.
What are your toppings? What are the toppings at?
Is this the what's in the box? Can we count this?
Because it's right here, by the way. No, it's still right here. We haven't opened it yet.
I'm fine with a cookie dough and the waffle cone plain. Hot fudge, marshmallow, maybe peanut butter. I like peanut butter. I know you're not a big peanut butter guy. Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And it is that time now.
It is that time.
In the box.
What is in the box, Trace? Brought to you by who? Our good friends at Alumni Hall, by the way. 4100 North Alafaya Trail if you want to get in there and buy some gear.
I keep forgetting to go there. And I was at Bar Louie the other night, and they were closed when I was over there.
Another great one. All right, I'm glad.
When you're happy about, mind you, you write all these questions.
Yes. No, you're gonna like this one. This is not.
Yes. No.
No. You have to listen to one of these two people talk about this topic for 24 straight hours. Who would you pick? Christian Simmons talking about uniforms?
Oh, Lord.
Brian Peterson talking about gold.
Oof.
24 hours straight.
I'm getting in that elevator trapped with JP Gilbert.
You have
and
to
apologizing for not
one
looking
of
him
these
up in
two. Now, you can do other things. You can be mowing your lawn. You can be exercising. But
you're
they're
going to put me in
following
odds
you
now with one of these.
They're following you.
Well,
one of these is more sensitive than the other. You and I both know that, so you can figure out who that is. But
I imagine that if I don't say Christian just won't care. He hates everybody.
He'll actually be happy. He doesn't have to talk to you for 24 hours. I think he would be more upset that he had to talk to you than you having to listen to him.
But here's the thing. I think and I'm pro gold. I'm with Brian on this. I think it would be easier to talk for 24 hours with Christian because you could go over 50 years of uniforms.
Yeah.
How long are you talking about gold? And this is the only topic, right?
24 hours.
This is the only topic.
That's
so
the only
after
topic.
the 20 minutes of gold jerseys, we can't talk about another thing. We got to.
Well, sure. Just recycle. I mean, gold. You got an hour on gold football, an hour on gold baseball, an hour on gold basketball, then the hour on why we left gold, an hour on the Golden Knights.
Sports. There's 16 hours there, but no, I'm going to go with Christian because I think we could talk logos and uniforms and color combos, and it'd be hard. Both of these are hard.
that would be a challenge. Look here. My only problem is I feel like if I pick Christian, even though I don't have to speak for these 24 hours, he would come out hating me just because he didn't want to have to talk for 24 hours. I think Brian would love 24 hours of
24 hours.
And
Brian's probably done it before.
And so I'm going to go Brian because I feel like Christian would never talk to me again if he had to talk to me for 24 straight hours. I feel like Brian would talk to me for 24 hours about gold, go home, take a power nap, grab a Celsius, and be right back on the horse in no time.
How about we put this to the test? You game?
Listen, I've got a work travel coming up.
I got a thing.
I'm going to Colorado. Remember we talked about this.
Yeah. You going to do anything fun while you're there? Have you been there for fun?
Never been there for fun. I feel like I can probably get in and play right field for the Rockies right now. So
well, this is true.
I might go and see if I can suit up. I'm Adam Eaton. Perhaps they'll think I was the former baseball player, and I'll get a couple.
Have you ever gotten confused for that? We've talked about this before.
There was one time I forget what it was. I signed up for some event or something, and my name was on the list. And I got there, and I was like, "Hi, I'm here. I'm Adam." Blah blah. And the guy was like, "Oh, it's like for a second, I thought." Are you the baseball player? And I was like, no, I'm not. He was like, oh, I saw you. Big White Sox fan. I saw your name on the list. I thought maybe it was you. I'm like, unfortunately, no. I'm not coming to, sanitation corporate event here. That's not what I'm here for. But no, that's the only time I've been confused for him.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's in the box. I was thinking today, we've been doing this for how long now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Trace. I pulled some statistics.
You were all about the stats today.
The amount of research I did on this show.
There's a lot of research. Look at that.
Unbelievable. Look at that.
All
right. So
and
there's some nuance here. So you have to go with me. The official launch of the Thursday live show, January 21st, 2021, which puts us at about roughly 225 episodes of Sons of UCF Live. Now, the long terms will remember that prior to that, we did a pregame show that was live before the 2020 football season. So there are some episodes that are out there of those, but that wasn't really what we branded as Sons Live. That did not come to fruition until Jan 21, 2021. Put that in the context, Trace. We could have graduated from UCF in the amount of time we've been doing Sons of UCF Live. We could have alternate degrees from the great University of Central Florida in the time we've been doing the live show.
I figured that I've done this almost as much as I did that prior show, Nightline, that I was involved with. That was about 5 years. This is almost 5 years. That's, a couple hundred shows? And that's not counting all the other things, right?
This is just a live show. This is just a live show.
That is several hundred guests. I mean, a lot of weeks we were doing two guests a week, sometimes three. There was a couple of three.
I never wanted to do the three.
We had a 4-guest show one time, didn't we? Do a 4-guest
This is going to come back to haunt me when I just said that. Yes, multiple guests on the show are often challenging to get booked in the windows we have available. We like to banter on here. We have questions from you all we want to get to. So multiple guests made it more challenging. But we did have a couple of times where I believe there were a few times we had 2 guests simultaneously, which was a complete cluster because
people in cars,
people,
what was the one guy was like this? We had a guy like this.
That was the Navy guy. I think we had Chris Duffy from a restaurant booth. I think he was having dinner with his family and ordered while he was with us.
We had the guy from the tourism department of Lubbock. Was at a basketball game. Remember him?
I do remember him. Yes, yeah. I do recall you booked that gentleman for reasons. I know. I don't know.
I don't know. Hundreds of guests. But what's the saying, Adam? You know the saying. All good things must come to an end.
There's too many sayings that I had that I wasn't sure where you were going with them.
All good things must come to an end. That having been said, Adam.
Yes.
It's time to announce.
Yeah.
Look, the Sons of UCF.
Tremont Morris Brash. Thanks for watching Sons of UCF.